You say something hopeful out loud. Maybe it is, I have not been sick all year. Maybe it is, the internet has not crashed once today. And then, almost before the sentence is finished, your knuckles hit the nearest wooden surface. A desk, a table, a door frame. Knock, knock. Not because anyone told you to do it in that moment. Not because you stopped to weigh the logic. Your hand just moved. That is the strange part. This little ritual can happen faster than thought, and it survives in people who would laugh at the idea of magic. People who trust medicine, data, and whether apps still tap a table after saying something fragile and hopeful. Why? Why does one of the oldest superstitions in the world still live inside such a modern brain? The short answer is that knocking on wood is doing two jobs at once. It is carrying a very old idea from the past, and it is solving a very modern problem in the present. The old idea is that wood can protect you. The modern problem is that uncertainty makes you uncomfortable. And when those two meet, a tiny ritual survives for centuries. The exact origin is not perfectly settled. That matters, because knocking on wood feels ancient partly because it is older than the phrase itself. In Britain, people often said touch wood. In America, knock on wood became more common. Folklorist Steve Roud notes that the phrase appears clearly in the 19th century, but the habit almost certainly reaches back much further through folk belief. The wording changed. The instinct did not. One popular explanation traces the habit to old beliefs about trees. In many early cultures, trees were not just plants. They were homes for spirits, symbols of protection, or sacred bridges between the ground and whatever felt greater than human life. A tree could outlive generations. It could survive storms, keep standing, and seem watchful. If a spirit lived in a tree, touching the wood might call for protection. In some versions, it might also keep dangerous spirits from hearing your good fortune and ruining it. That sounds distant now, but for a long time, it did not sound strange at all. Another theory connects the custom to Christianity. Wood gained sacred meaning because of the cross. Touching wood could become a quiet gesture of reverence or protection, a way of linking yourself to a holy symbol at a moment of uncertainty. Historians cannot prove one clean source for everyone, everywhere, and that is probably because customs like this usually do not spread from one perfect origin story. They gather strength from many beliefs at once. Pagan symbolism, religious symbolism, family habit, childhood imitation. Then eventually language freezes the habit into a quick phrase. Knock on wood, touch wood, do not jinx it. By that point, the belief no longer needs a full explanation. The action itself is enough. That is why this ritual is so interesting. It did not survive because people carefully preserved an argument about trees. It survived because it became useful. And this is where psychology enters. The anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski noticed something important while studying the Trobriand Islanders in the early 20th century. When fishing in the safe inner lagoon, people relied mostly on skill. When going into the dangerous open sea, where weather and luck mattered more, ritual increased. That pattern has shown up again and again in human life. The less control you feel, the more attractive ritual becomes. Not because ritual changes the ocean, because it changes you. A small action can make a large unknown feel slightly less shapeless, and knocking on wood appears exactly in those moments. You do not usually do it after saying the sky is blue. You do it after saying something exposed. I think the interview went well. This relationship is finally stable. Looks like we might actually make it. It happens when hope feels vulnerable. You say the good thing. Then you immediately protect the good thing, almost as if speaking it too confidently might attract loss. Psychologists Jane Rizin and Thomas Jailovich studied this kind of superstition and found something subtle. People can perform superstitious behaviors even when they do not fully endorse them at a rational level. In other words, you can know something is irrational and still feel a tug toward doing it anyway, because the emotional part of the mind is not asking, is this logically sound? It is asking, what if not doing it feels worse? That is the power of a low-cost ritual. If knocking on wood costs almost nothing, skipping it can feel strangely riskier than doing it. The logic becomes emotional. I do not really believe this works, but why tempt fate? That sentence is the real engine of superstition, not certainty, just reluctance to leave uncertainty alone. Another reason the habit survives is that rituals can calm the body. Researchers Francesca Gino and Michael Norton found that ritualized actions can reduce anxiety and help people feel more control during stressful situations. The action does not need supernatural power to have psychological effect. It only needs structure. Do this small thing, in this order. Now continue. That is soothing to the mind. It creates a tiny boundary around fear. Even grief studies have shown that ritual can help people recover a sense of order after loss. So when you knock on wood, part of what you may be doing is regulating emotion. You are not just protecting the future. You are calming the present, and then there is habit. Children do not learn customs like this through lectures. They absorb them. A parent says, "We have been lucky so far, knock on wood." A classmate says it. A TV host says it. An athlete says it in a post-game interview. You hear it hundreds of times before you ever stop to inspect it. By adulthood, it feels less like a superstition and more like punctuation, a verbal seatbelt. It sits at the end of a hopeful sentence and signals that you know life can turn. That social function matters too. Knocking on wood can communicate humility. It says, "I am hopeful, but I am not arrogant. I know things can change." That makes it useful even for skeptics. Without that little ritual, confidence can sound like overconfidence. With it, the sentence becomes softer, safer, less like a challenge thrown at the universe. That is why similar customs exist across cultures. The details change, but the emotional need is familiar. People avoid speaking too confidently about fragile good fortune. People create little gestures to guard what they care about. Some cross their fingers. Some avoid certain numbers. Some perform pre-game routines with almost religious seriousness. Students before exams, athletes before competition, even people refreshing an email. Before opening, it can drift into ritual, when the outcome matters and control does not feel complete. Modern life did not erase superstition. It just dressed it in smaller, more casual forms. You can see that in language. Many people say knock on wood while fully expecting nothing mystical to happen, and yet they still look for wood. A desk is preferred. A wooden chair works. If there is no wood nearby, sometimes people fake the gesture on something else and laugh. That laughter is revealing. It is the sound of two minds coexisting. One mind says this is silly. The other says do it anyway. That split is deeply human. The scientist B.F. Skinner once showed how easily patterns can form around random outcomes when his pigeons repeated behaviors that seem to bring rewards. Human beings are more reflective than pigeons, but not free from the same tendency. When relief follows ritual a few times, the bond feels sticky. Rationally, you know the tapping and the outcome are unrelated. Emotionally, the pairing leaves a trace, and traces become traditions. This does not mean people who knock on wood are gullible. If anything, it reveals how layered the mind is. You can live by science and still feel the pull of symbolism. You can reject magic and still practice miniature rituals. You can know life is ruled by probability and still feel uneasy when hope is spoken too boldly. That is because human beings do not run only on facts. They also run on feeling, pattern, memory, imitation, and the need to act when acting helps settle the heart. So why do you still knock on wood without knowing why? Because some part of you inherited an old conversation with uncertainty. Long ago, that conversation may have involved spirits in trees or sacred wood. Today, it may involve nothing more than a desk and a half-joking phrase. But the emotional logic is almost the same. You have noticed something good. You know good things can disappear. You do not want to stand there empty-handed in front of that fact. So you do something small, a tap, a knock, a borrowed ritual from the deep past, not powerful enough to control the future, but often powerful enough to make the moment feel steadier. And maybe that is why these habits last. Not because modern people secretly live in the ancient world, but because the ancient world never fully left the modern mind. It is still there in the tiny gestures you make when hope feels exposed, still there in the things you do before chance has spoken, still there in the quiet knock that turns a fragile sentence into something you can bear to believe.